So in a surprising turn of events, the left-wing alliance, New Popular Front, has garnered the largest share of votes in the French elections. Meanwhile, Marine Le Pen's far-right party, National Rally, secured the third position, largely due to tactical voting. However, no party achieved a majority in parliament, plunging the country into a political deadlock. This outcome signals a period of uncertainty as France grapples with the challenges of forming a stable government amidst diverse political ideologies. Professor Stephen Chen from the School of Oriental and African Studies in the Faculty of Law and Social Sciences at the London University is now joining us for more on this, on the French elections. Professor Chen, good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Could Emmanuel Macron have anticipated that these elections will result in cohabitation?
Yes, I think there's no choice in any case now but some form of cohabitation. But the fighting talk that's coming out of the various parties on the left at this moment in time is not exactly conducive to cohabitation. We're probably going to have to wait some days, if not some weeks, before temperatures lower themselves so there can be some sensible compromise. It's a revolutionary country. France is not very much addicted to compromise, but like its European neighbors and like South Africa, it's going to have to learn how to enter some kind of coalition government.
Yeah, and here's the thing about these elections, because the snap poll was called by Emmanuel Macron following what happened during the European parliamentary vote. And if you look at some of the analysis heading into the elections, the focus was more on the centrist as well as the far right. However, it is the left that has actually emerged with most of the votes. What happened here?
Macron took a decisive but snap reaction to the European elections. He didn't have to call these elections, and the right had a huge majority in the first round. The French have a complicated system whereby if you get more than 12.5% in the first round, you can stand in the second round. So what happened was basically an agreement in the left and the center to cull their candidates, to cut down the number of people from both the center and the left who could stand against the right so they wouldn't get into each other's way. And that worked. The real objective was to defeat the right. They've done that, but they haven't achieved a second objective, and that is to form the foundations for a workable government. Yeah.
Emmanuel Macron remains a president up until 2027. And in terms of the cohabitation, what does this mean for Africa, the continent, considering, of course, that you have the Choose Africa initiative? And according to the cohabitation, the president is in charge of foreign policy as well as remaining the commander-in-chief of the army. What does this mean for Africa?
Yes, that will remain the case. Macron will be basically the final word on foreign policy, particularly towards Africa. The French are still learning some lessons about the way they've conducted themselves in Africa. A lot of arrogance went into the former relationships, and they've been asked to leave a number of West African countries. They'll probably try to strengthen their relations with Anglophonic countries. That means including South Africa. So there'll be an outreach to SADC countries in general, to South Africa, to Nigeria and Ghana in the west of the continent, and of course to the East African bloc. So you're looking at a new leaf in the French playbook on international relations as far as Africa is concerned. At the same time, the French have amazing standby military capacity. The way they intervened in Mali against the Malian jihadist sweep through the country some years ago, they've still got that capacity. So though they've left a number of West African countries, they are a very strange country and seeking friendly relationships, but still having the capacity, if need be, to intervene very dramatically and very quickly. I doubt that will be called upon anytime soon, but that standby capacity is not going away either anytime soon.
Yeah, and with this election, of course, as Emmanuel Macron continues with his presidency, is that things in the Sahel region have changed, because now we have a state of Sahel alliance, including the various countries, including Niger, Mali, as well as Burkina Faso, that have now moved out of ECOWAS. And some of the issues that were raised before was that France has some political influence over ECOWAS leaders.
It has influence over francophonic ECOWAS leaders, far less so over anglophonic leaders, such as the ones in Nigeria and Ghana, which is why there will be an outreach to them. And don't forget, there's a filling of what would have been a military vacuum left by France with its withdrawal. And this military vacuum has been filled by Wagner, the Russian mercenary army. I'm not sure whether this is jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, but what you have still is a foreign military presence in many West African states. And Africa as a whole needs to look to that, needs to look to its own capacity to deal with its internal problems. But France will still be hovering in the wings. As I say, their standby facility is not going away anytime soon. They're not going to force themselves on West Africa, but they are going to make diplomatic overtures throughout the entire continent.
Yeah. With these elections, again, also, if you look at Marine Le Pen, some of the analysis that we looked at when it comes to geopolitics is that she was perceived, or the party was perceived, to be more aligned to Moscow compared to the other political parties. And considering what we've just spoken about and what's happening in the Sahel region, and with these three countries trying to foster closer relationship with the Wagner Group as well as Russia by extension, what does this mean for politics of France post the 2027 elections?
As far as Russia is concerned, there's an immediate problem on Europe's doorstep, and that's the war in Ukraine. And so what to do about Russia is a major debating issue and policy issue in France. There's no doubt that battle lines are being drawn, the European Union and the United States, against Russia. The picture is complicated by what to do about China. So you've got increasingly a three-horse race in international politics. Now, it's doubtful that Marine Le Pen is going to be hugely influential in this debate in France. She's got to regroup. They were expecting victory. This was going to be their big breakthrough, and it didn't come. So she has to regroup and perhaps also re-sort out her foreign policy. It's not a popular foreign policy in France, where basically the entire historical cry for liberty and liberté began in France during the French Revolution. And that's antithetical to what is going on in Russia right now.
Mm-hmm. And again, the outcomes of the European parliamentary vote and what has happened now with the parliamentary elections in France, how does that impact the relationship of the European Parliament and also the stability that is required in terms of geopolitics and heading forward, especially considering this war with Ukraine?
Well, basically, it's the United States that's providing a very great deal of material support for the Ukrainian resistance to Russia. Europe wishes to help, and it is helping. There's no debate about whether or not they should help Ukraine, or the major parties, even with some equivocation on the part of the far right, is in support of the Ukrainian government, certainly at this point in time. What it means for European unity as a whole, well, there are several blocs in the European Parliament. And so you've got now probably some kind of lack of balance in the European Parliament. Hungary, in fact, is the one that might come closer to an alliance with Russia. All eyes on that. So Europe has its own problems, its own dissensions, its own differences in policy. I wouldn't expect too much dramatic change in the French posture on Europe. There will probably be some very early outreach in terms of relationships with Germany to strengthen the line against the surge of the right, which has reached, in fact, as far as Italy. But a lot will depend on who becomes prime minister. This is the key debating point now, and personality politics are looming so hugely, even at this early moment in time. Whoever becomes prime minister will have a huge directive role in forging the shape of that European policy.
Yeah, and very important is whether Emmanuel Macron will have a good working relationship with whoever becomes the prime minister of the country. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Stephen Chan from the School of Oriental and African Studies in the Faculty of Law and Social Sciences at the London University.